Chapter 7. Every beaten, forlorn prisoner lay awake with their head resting against their cell's cinder-block wall. All were hearing the faraway laughter echo throughout their sleepy block. All were awaiting the poker game's finale. Only after the poker cards returned to their designated deck would the night watch shut up. And the motherfucker was turned on like a light bulb. Never in my life have I seen a sorry sumbitch so doggone horny. Norman nearly spat out his Cuban from laughing at this. Kurt slapped his cards down and punched the miniature office table he and the other 3 guards occupied. All humor was quickly forgotten, however, when Kurt caught Harold sneaking a peek at his hand. "Cheater," Kurt whined. Harold shrugged. "What are you gonna do? Lock me up? I'm already here." Another storm of laughter brewed. By the time it faded, Kurt's playful spirit returned. The only night shift guard who didn't partake in the nightly poker tournament, nor recite any crude and exaggerated fables, was Jimmy. Jimmy sat reclined with his ear tuned not towards the conversation, but to the office's bronze gramophone, which was currently spinning Al Bawley's hit, "Goodnight, Sweetheart." But despite Al Bawley crooning directly into his ears, Jimmy didn't lose himself to the piano keys or violin strings or Bawley's poetry. Instead, he was trapped inside a depressing daydream regarding his uncertain future at the Mug. Ever since the meeting earlier that day, he'd been reevaluating his plan for the long term. Did he really want to work at a prison so terribly managed? 2 prisoners dug a hole through the wall in broad daylight and took off on their merry way to freedom. And worse, instead of taking accountability for the situation, Blue created a private investigation. 10 bounty hunters and private investigators were contacted to help with the silent hunt already. Aiding the hunters would be Blue himself, along with his best man. The investigation was set to officially begin come sunrise and continue until Dale and Elmer were returned to the prison courtyard. Jimmy's plan was to call in saying he ate some bad tomatoes and that he'd been suffering crippling stomach pain since. Or he'd not call in at all and spend the day driving to the mayor's office, or the governor's office, or whomever he needed to contact and inform them about the ugly Mug's uninhabitable, unworkable conditions. Only, Jimmy had no idea where to go, whom to see, or how to get there. The whole situation was such a disaster he didn't know if it was repairable to begin with. An image flashed around in his head, showing the Mug engulfed in flames and him standing before it all, an empty tin of gasoline in hand. Blue and his guards and his office and the prisoners would all be found resembling charred marshmallows dropped too close to the campfire. God knew no rain would come to extinguish Jimmy's blaze. Reality somehow found its way back to Jimmy just as Norman was finished up with the story of a prisoner who got sent to the padded room for inventing a secret language and refusing to translate the words for Blue. "Hey Jimmy, you alright there?" Kurt asked. "Yup," Jimmy lied. He didn't want to burn down the Mug. Although the guards' innocence was debatable, the prisoners certainly did not deserve getting scorched alive. No, Jimmy instead wanted to go home, take a nap, and run away from this mess with his wife and daughter. He'd burn Blue's house down in the process, too. Just as his thought concluded, Al Bowley's song ended. Before anyone replaced the 78, Harold hissed, "Quiet, everybody." Everyone froze, trying to detect Harold's noise. "Sounds like someone's moaning from outside," he whispered. "One of the prisoners, I'd say. Give him time and he'll shut up. And if it's urgent, maybe the fellow will die. Either way's fine by me," Norman said, too busy studying his cards for eye contact. No. If it was one of the prisoners, we'd hear it from the doorway. This is coming from out the window. Whoever he is, he's outside the building altogether," Harold said. "I checked up on the last disturbance." Kurt's head tilted towards Jimmy. "That means it's your turn, pal." "Well, is anyone coming with, or am I doing this alone?" Jimmy had already risen from his chair and was worming his arms through the sleeves of his field jacket. Everybody stared at him blankly, not nodding or shaking their heads until Jimmy grew too impatient to continue waiting. He donned his stocking cap and muttered, "To hell with the buddy system anyway," on his way out. Chapter 8. A car honked at them, and a few people gave disgusted looks as they climbed out from the street and ran into the nearest alleyway. Neither minded. They needed to put as much distance between them and the body as possible before self-image would become a problem. Once their hands stopped shaking and their hearts relaxed, Dale and Elmer found a creek to bathe in, a dumpster to change into fresher clothes behind, and a barrel fire to warm up beside. The fire was located under the creek's bridge. For the longest time, only the squealing of overhead tires, the popping of smoldering junk in the stream's ripples was heard. Those and the occasional snoring of the dozing, homeless individuals carpeting the creek's shore. Omer and Dale envied those passed out by the waterside. Both knew tonight was going to be restless. Elmer spoke. What the hell was that? It's a dead girl, that's what. Dale's voice rattled as he spoke. Not just any dead girl. She was murdered, mutilated. The fire popped. A galaxy of sparks shot into the air and slowly hovered back to the ground with the smooth sway of a dropped umbrella. Great, Elmer said. Now we've got a dead body on our hands as well as the prison hunting us. What do you suppose we're supposed to do about it? Who says the prison's hunting us? Well, someone's hunting us down. Two escapees don't just get off the hook scot-free. It don't feel like they're hunting us. That's because they're still planning, gathering up all the sources and working out every nook and cranny of the operation so it'll go as smoothly as possible. That's how they work. They're all planners. They gotta be so public don't think they're wasting tax money on a pack of mad dogs. Now, what do you suppose we do? Suppose we ought to phone the police. Let them know they've got a dead girl in them sewers and a murder on the loose. No, Elmer barked. What then? The investigators find out that we're escaped prisoners and kick us back to the ugly mug? Only this time with a life sentence? Or is that what you want, to go back to prison? Yes, I hoped that would happen. I hoped we'd call in on the dead girl, the killer would get caught, and we'd get sent back to the mug where we belong. But you're right. We'd get a big fat life sentence slapped on our records for escaping. The only downfall to an otherwise perfect plan. And is a pretty deep fall for a pretty worthless plan, which is why you need to forget all about that plan and any other plan which ends with us going back to the mug. Dale considered Elmer's position. Dead silence infiltrated their conversation and stayed long enough for a homeless man to stumble under their bridge, stop to warm his fingers, and return to the streets without a word spoken between the three. They could thank us, perhaps, Dale said. Maybe the police will be grateful for us finding the dead girl and leave us be. I don't know about that one, Dale. I did some pretty nasty stuff before getting caught. Dale pried his eyes from the fire's hypnotic flare and looked to Elmer. Elmer's face and the barrel's smoking innards were the only objects in existence at that moment. The rest of the world was thoroughly concealed behind a black curtain of night. Fiery shadows cast themselves upon Elmer's face. A dark mark existed for every wrinkle and pore on his head. Devilish red skin was in between, and his eyes, usually black, now flickered with a million shades of orange. Elmer spoke his story. I grew up in a crummy family, a crime family. My mommy ran off to work at some warehouse a few years after I was born, leaving me, my two older brothers, and my daddy to fend for ourselves. Money was tight for farmers back then, and without Mom, my daddy figured he had nothing to lose. So he ran up a bank. It paid well, so he did it again and again until he made a career out of it. He'd drag us along with him. Guns blazed and people screamed until we got what we wanted. Then we'd head down to the next town and do it again, and so on and so forth until we lived happily ever after. It's a no-brainer, however, that there'd be no happily ever after. I wouldn't know that, of course. I was young, dumb, and naive. Hell, I think I was only 10 years old when the bad shootout happened. It was an entire town full of cops versus a family of farmers. One of my brothers got captured. The other got a bullet between the eyes. That left just my dad and me to run the business. Can you imagine it, Dale? A 40-year-old man out robbing banks with a 10-year-old getaway driver? You better imagine it, 'cause that's the closest it'll ever be to coming true. After the shootout, things fell apart for us. Soon after, my dad got busted, leaving me to fend for my own. The coppers caught up with me after a few years of wandering around. At least I lasted longer than my dad. Elmer coughed up a short, forced chuckle and began rubbing his hands above the fire. Dale silently reflected on Elmer's story, picking it apart and stitching it back together, all to reach the conclusion that he was standing across from the son of a notorious bank robber. Nobody will let Elmer off the hook for stumbling across a dead body. What'd you do, Dale? Similar to you, I guess, Dale began. You see, I used to run a magician's act. Used to go around with my gal Rita and our gang. I'd be the lead performer, and Rita was his lovely assistant. Would have been my wife, too, you know, if only that accident never happened. We used to travel all over Iowa, to parties, carnivals, balls, usually to whoever paid us the most. County fairs were our main go-to. They paid well and the audience loved us. Well, one day, a letter inviting us to perform at this fancy hotel restaurant circled around to us. Rita and I were growing slim in the wallets by then, and the hotel said they'd pay well. The problem came up when the papers said we thought they didn't pay well enough. Everybody thinks we robbed them. Of course, that ain't true. I just messed up on a trick and accidentally incited a riot. One half of the crowd thought I was fake and the other half defended me with their lives. Somebody then took advantage of all that commotion and decided to pull off a heist while no one was looking. As people were throwing tomatoes at me and fists at their pals, all the cash registers were being pried open and drained. A bold move, and I'd say a stupid one too, if they hadn't gotten away with it. The police recovered one bag of money from the incident. It was painted in my magic wagon. I was framed, Elmer. I have a sneaky suspicion of who framed me too, but we ain't gonna get into that. All that matters is that I was framed. And of course, the police don't care if they caught the right guy, Elmer butted in. It was much easier to point fingers and move on to the next case. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, I was locked up for robbery, destruction of property, and for disturbing the peace. I don't think the police are gonna let you go free, man. Yeah, we're both more innocent than they think, but we can't convince them we're good people just by calling in a dead body. As I said, they'd rather point fingers and move on than actually catch the killer. If anything, you'd be framed again, this time for murder. You're completely right, Dale said. Another long silence followed. To Elmer, that was the conversation's end. He needed sleep anyway. Before Elmer called it a night, however, Dale said, "Alrighty then. If the police think we killed her, so be it. What we gotta do is find out who really committed the crime and have him arrested so the police can't think it's us, you know? Do all the hard parts for them." Yeah, but how are we supposed to solve a murder? We can't, that's how. We aren't detectives or police or even remotely smart. We're wanted. Whether we did anything wrong or not, we're two wanted men on the run. So what we gotta do is put on our jogging shoes and scram out of here before someone finds out we've been anywhere near that damn corpse. No, I've read enough Sherlock to know we can do this. It'll be simple. Just think back to what you saw in the sewers. Did anything stand out to you? Yes. There was a dead body and two escaped prisoners in there, Elmer said. Wonder what people will conclude from that. Come on, Elmer. I need your help. If we just up and skip town like you want, it'll leave the girl decaying down in the sewer and Hobo Crow running around ready to kill again. It's a coward's move just abandoning her like that. Are you a coward, Elmer? Dale studied Elmer's visage, attempting to determine what emotions were coursing through his skull. To Dale's surprise, Elmer wasn't emoting. His face revealed nothing but stale plasticity. It wasn't until 2 minutes dragged past that Dale realized what this signified. Elmer wasn't feeling, he was thinking. Elmer's hunched posture soon corrected itself as though he was jolted awake by the sound of trumpets. Nearly yelling, he said, "That's where I heard of Hobo Crow before." Dale cocked his head. Hobo Crow? That's what you called the killer just now. Well, that's what was carved on the body. Elmer snapped his fingers. But I heard the name Hobo Crow long before seeing it on that body. One night long ago, the strangest stranger I've ever met was rambling on about that name, Hobo Crow. Boy, was he drunk. Never saw a man as drunk as he was that night, and I don't think I ever saw him again. A twinge of fiery excitement flashed burned throughout Elmer's body. But I know where we can find more information about this Hobo Crow character. He reached into his goodie bag and produced two patched-up sports jackets. He tossed the scraggier jacket to Dale. Here, put this on. We gotta look dapper where we're going.